I'm going to present my school books, exercise books in Key Stage 3 for one video, Key Stage 4 for the next, and my school report. I was partially inspired to do this because I see children now and then uncaringly tearing pages out of their exercise books, and I don't remember doing it. And I say to them, I've got my school books from when I was a boy because I value my childhood, and I hope you'll keep some of your books as a memory of your days at school. And if you take pride in your work, you won't want to tear pages out. So I'm going to show you a double page spread from all these books: Key Stage 3, 4 and school reports. And we start off the King Alfred School, Highbridge, Somerset, and you'll see commas there. We don't do that anymore with open punctuation. And this spread shows you opposite angles being equal. Then on the 6th of June in 1967 we got magic squares. Children still learn those topics, and I've forgotten about the magic squares, but I remember teaching it and latching onto it rather fast, but I don't use it in real life. Maths homework book. It's got Mrs. Bacon, best teacher. And in those days, if you wanted to draw on your book, you were invited to cover it with parcel paper or wallpaper. Even if you didn't want to draw on it, you were invited to protect the book and take pride in it. And this is an example of homework where I was awarded 7 out of 10. This is an interesting book. We started off doing science in 1966 with Miss Smedley, and then went on to Mr. Bromfield. Now Miss Smedley wrote in my book, Messy, and I told her about that. Not in 1966, but I was in a school in Weston-super-Mare in 1999 and 2000, and by May I realised that Alison, forgotten her last name, she was my science teacher when I was 11. And I took the book into her next day. I said, look, all those years ago, 1966, and now we're in 2000, you wrote that in my book, Messy. So that was the Bunsen Burner, and I still notice as a supply teacher, when I cover all these different subjects, the children still draw the diagram of the Bunsen Burner. This is geography now, my favourite subject of all time. And it was taught to us by Mrs. Seeley. This is the 8th of November in 1966, where we were learning latitude and longitude. Nice colourful drawings. Young student Michael Turner taking pride in his work, but it didn't last all the way through to year 11 or the 5th year. And I wrote down my exam results because I was in 1B2. That was the middle band, middle stream. And I was working hard, and I was coming top in lots of subjects, especially the humanities. And here we have these end of year test papers which were used to regulate children to go up or down in the streams. And this was by Mr. P.M. Higman. I spoke to him in December 2018. And I told him how it influenced me and some of his sayings that I still use in school. And you can see how history, when I was in year 1, year 7 now, history exam paper, written out and photocopied. With a test paper here, English, typed out. And then I've got a Christmas list written in English lesson. I don't know why it's on a loose paper. Then we go into year 8, which was the 2nd year in those days. This is a maths book, and we've got area of circle. Now Mrs. Bacon took us out into the playground. We put a piece of rope on the ground and chalked a circle around that rope. We lifted the rope and wrapped it around the circle and realised we could do that 3 times with a bit left over. And she told us that was how pi was devised. And when I ask children the origin of pi, they can't tell me. So I tell them about Mrs. Bacon's lesson, which children sadly aren't taught this day and age. My favourite teacher, Mr. Ladd, RE 2B2 at Year 8 Middle Stream. And I've written biblical verses on the back, drawn some crosses on the front of the book. And I chose a page here which says Old Testament Winter Term 1967. So I'm in Year 8, second year. And you turn the pages and we're looking at Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. My favourite teacher, because he told us lots of stories about his time when he was living in Australia, and I realised then I wanted to see the world, and I was always wanting him to tell stories. And here we've got Elijah at Mount Carmel, and when I worked on the kibbutz in Israel in 1977, I went there and remembered the teaching from Mr. Ladd. Here we've got mathematics, and I'm learning about triangles, the length of sides and angles, and something in maths I understand and enjoy helping children learn today. And it says here, leave more room for your proofs. So all my workings to prove my workings were cramped. So I often tell children today when they're doing maths, leave space. And here we've got a science book from Year 8, which was the second year then. It's Osmosis. The potato did not dissolve. Explanation. So I was quite a neat worker. Bit of a keener is what they would call you in Bristol. History, Mrs. Evans. She was hard work. First of all, I've got the book covered. Bristol City. I'm in Year 8, second year. She was the wife of the doctor, and she would just read all lesson, dictating. We just writing all lesson non-stop. And here's a bit of a treat. We had time to draw an Elizabethan galleon, and I've been drawing them since I was 7 years old. So I'd always been interested in Francis Drake's era. Mr. Maddie, history. He was another one of these teachers. He didn't dictate. He'd give us a history book. We'd have to copy pages every lesson. And here I've got one of my favourite subjects. I've drawn a map of the Spanish Armada. And little did I know I would lecture on that on a cruise ship in 2017 after being taught the subject when I was in 1967. And here we've got an English book in Year 8, 15th of May 1968. I got when it is good to be alone, and a list following when it is disagreeable to be alone. When I go through these books, I realised I've had a pretty good education. Geography, Year 8, Mrs. Rees. Now she was gorgeous. Bristol City, yeah. And she's written here, finish these notes before next lesson. And on the map of Scotland, she says, one of the rules of map drawing is never block letters to shade around coastline. One line will do. And why are these rivers in green? Another pile of test papers from Year 8, February 1968, science. And here's my answers on surface tension with experiments being described. Geography. Answer 5 questions, written out in the teacher's handwriting for the A and the B stream. Gosh, I don't know why I collected all this. Religious knowledge, maths. And then I've got my positions in this class exams where I've come first in history, RE, maths. Oh my gosh, position 31st, that's near the bottom, 24%. Metalwork, oh this is year 9, 7th. Yeah, slipping at maths as I got older, found it more difficult. Then we did projects which were not in our books. Ice and snow. And here we've got the work of glaciers. The physical features you'll see as the glacier starts and slides down the mountainside. Here we've got rivers. And here we've got a shadoof in Egypt on the River Nile. So when I photographed a shadoof in 1982, I knew what I was looking at and how it worked. And here we've got the River Colorado, the water system in the United States. Must be year 9 here, tangents. Found maths very, very hard, and I was always waiting for the teacher to go on to the next subject, next topic in the subject, I mean, because I was always hoping I'd understand it better. I mean, I tell children to use compasses, not draw by freehand. It makes it a bit scruffy like I've done here. Homework in the same book. There you are, long division. I could manage that. Once it went on to trigonometry and algebra, I was getting lost. This is interesting. Year 9, A3A, it's biology and rural science. And here we've got hardwood cuttings and digestion. And it says here, still a little untidy, but good otherwise. These are interesting. These are smaller books, French vocabulary book and French notes. And I was fancying myself as a bit of a portrait artist, labelling in French. Got French and English vocabulary here. Same in this book. But I got moved up into the A stream halfway through year 2, which is year 8, and I was just far too behind in French to catch up, and I messed around. And I remember Mrs. Cousins sending me to the headmaster about my distracted messing around. And I said to the headmaster, Mr. Edge, I'll try to improve my behaviour. And he says, you will improve your behaviour. So I really struggled, and it meant nothing to me in the end. Well, it was quite neat. There's 16 out of 25 there. This is, let's have a look. This is a history book. Neat. Taking magazine photographs. This is pretty rare. This shows Burnham-on-Sea in the days when I was a child with the Marine Lake. There's the Marine Lake, which is gone now. So we did some local history. And we did the domestic system in 1760 with some quite neat drawings there. Growth of goodwill, the testament to the poor, trade unions, children in factories, and slavery. Look at that. Topic that never goes out of style. There's a map of it, triangular route, slaves on board the ship. The British Empire, Sir John Hawkins, Freetown, Liberia. John Hawkins, England's first slave trader. Maths, standard form in year 9. There you are. and trigonometry. Now, I never really understood that, but I was in Egypt in 1978. I met this Englishman. He said, let's climb the tallest pyramid in the world, Cheops. I said, what's the best way up? He said, from his days of trigonometry learning in school, it's going to be the corner. It's going to be longer, but it's going to be not so steep. And that's about the only thing I ever remember from trigonometry. Again, maths, proving a theorem. I could obviously do the copying in Pride, but I wouldn't necessarily understand what I was doing. I've got algebra here. Never fully understood that at all. I can manage equations, simple equations now. And here we've got projects. Coal, oil, iron and steel. I've made an effort there. I've drawn some examples of iron and steel and a razor blade that people used in those days. And I've got a graph here of the production values of the industry throughout the British Isles on a bar graph. Then we've got textiles project, and you can see the fashions in the 1960s. And we've got maps of Australia. Yeah, maps of Australia. Good eye, Mike. What else we got here? The difficulties of sheep farming in Australia. So the geography got a bit more in depth here. And the reasons for growth of Yorkshire wool industry, 12th of the 2nd, 69. Often when we write dates on boards, we don't put the year. Sometimes I deliberately do it because I've noticed in these books sometimes you don't know what year it is. Then I was very interested in Brunel. I wrote a story about him in 1969. Again, we've got July 1969. That's going to be, what was it, year 8, year 9? Oh yeah, here's a biology answer paper by yours truly, showing a diagram of the heart. I got 33 marks. This was this is June in the end of year 9, 3 years. That's going to be at 1969 there, I think. And that's it for Key Stage 3. So I was well behaved generally. I responded to discipline. If I got smacked, I knew it was part of the course. I deserved it. Didn't mention it to the parents. Always apologised and get on with my work. And I was doing very well, but I was starting to slip. And in the next video, this will be brought into focus. Stay chipper and keep studying, children. Do your best.